Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Jason Kelly, here with my partner, Alex Rodriguez. Alex, we're going to get to our interview with Michael Kay, of course, play-by-play legend for the Yankees. So much to talk to him about. I've got some things I want to ask him about you, about the Yankees, and lots of other stuff. He's had an incredible career from growing up in the shadows of Yankee Stadium to now being literally the voice. He was the voice also on Saturday that a lot of people were hearing when you went back to Yankee Stadium for a very big moment. It was so awesome to watch from afar. Tell us about it. Tell me what it was like.
Yeah, Jason, I wish you were there because I know you were there with family a few weeks ago, but it was really an incredible afternoon, an incredible weekend for that matter. I was flooded with unexpected emotions. Boy, 15 years feels like 15 seconds. And it's just really cool and interesting. There's something that happens to grown men, I guess grown people, when you win something so big, so special for a city, especially a place like New York City, and to do it with all your guys and to be basking in those great memories. It was so much fun.
And so this was the coming together, just to make sure everybody knows. So this was 15 years since the 2009 World Series, the last time the Yankees won, last time they even played in the World Series, if I'm correct about that. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about the Yankees in a second, but I want to stay with you. You know, going back to Yankee Stadium is always, I don't know if it's tricky, but like it's weighted, it's weighty. What were you feeling as you sort of walked out and walked into the crowd, walked up the dugout steps?
Yeah, right when I was in the dugout steps, I was kind of just joking around with Mariano Rivera and a few of other guys. And I was flooded with emotions. I mean, even going back to the torture and the agony of defeat versus the Red Sox in 2004, just 5 years prior to that, after being up 3-0 in that series and then losing 4 in a row. And then you cut to 5 years later and just the thrill of victory and to be able to lock it down and close that World Series against the Philadelphia Phillies, who had won the championship in 2008 the prior year. It was incredible. And obviously to get a nice ovation at Yankee Stadium, I haven't been back in a while. It was like a dream come true.
You were nice enough to share with me that before you came out, you were in the clubhouse with the team, and not just with the team, but with Derek Jeter. He's been a guest on this show. We've talked a lot about your relationship over the years. That feels like a very big moment. It's one thing for him to like sit and chop it up with us, but to be, sort of officially together in the clubhouse. What was that like?
Yeah, it was nice. Booney and the hitting coaches asked us to talk to the hitters. And I walked in with Derek Jeter and Jorge Posada, and the three of us just spoke to them for about 20 or 30 minutes and kind of just went over. Really, sometimes in a long season, Jason, you need to hear a voice outside of like mom and dad, which are your manager and your pitching coach and your hitting coach.
Yeah.
And when they hear it from a different voice and they're hearing exactly the same thing, it just brings a lot of reassurance to the players and coaching staffs. And hopefully we were able to cement the thought process. And our message was short, it was tight. And basically they have all the talent in the world. They just have to figure out a way how to play hard, how to compete, and how to eliminate, the little mental mistakes. And there's no doubt that they can win a championship this year.
All right, so you're feeling good about this team? Because I don't know. I look around, I watch the games, I talk to people. I don't know. They're making it hard to love them sometimes, this Yankee team.
I think they have enough talent to win. I think their biggest opponent is themselves, right? And the one thing you can control is to play hard every single night, which, they have not done that thus far this year. But Derek had a great message is whatever the numbers are to this point, that's it. Those are going to be your numbers. Maybe 2% here, 2% there. The only thing that matters is why we're here 15 years later is winning, and winning a championship in New York is vital. And that's what they have an opportunity to do.
All right. So before we get to Michael Kay, just give me 30 seconds on Michael Kay, because this is a guy you've known forever. You knew of each other before you came together. You hosted a show called K-Rod, an alternate broadcast. and he made some big calls over the course of your career.
Yeah, I think Michael Kay is one of the most important members of the Yankees family in their zeitgeist. I mean, if probably the most important person not named Aaron Judge, because he's a guy that he's a legacy connector. You got to understand, when he was in his 20s and now he's in the other side of 60, he started as a New York Post writer. Then he went to the Daily News, and then he went to MSG, and he's kind of done it all. But he's grown up in the shadows of Yankee Stadium. He's like the single most authentic fan. He just happens to be really great at his job and be the voice. But when you think about a guy that can say, I introduced Joe DiMaggio, Yogi Berra, Reggie Jackson, Lou Piniella, Derek Jeter, he's the one guy that can connect all those dots. He's an incredible person. And for me personally, I'm just a big fan of his work. Both as a player, when I had big moments, I wanted him doing it because no one does the big moments better than Michael Kay. But also just someone that is a soothing voice that is very habitual and, recognizable.
Yeah, well, and we're going to ask him about the calls he made and one particular call that he didn't make, much to your chagrin.
Yes, and it has to do with something like 500, but we'll leave it right there.
We'll leave it at that. All right. Coming up, Michael Kay. All right, so now we're going to bring in Michael Kay. I've so been looking forward to this conversation, mostly between the two of you. This is going to be super fun. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to start by asking you, how long have you known this guy? When do you recall first meeting Alex?
Well, he was definitely with the Seattle Mariners, so that's a long time. So it's over 30 years, right, Alex? Beautiful.
So let's go back there. Let's go back to your college days. You grow up and you go to school, practically in the shadow of Yankee Stadium. When did you know that that's what you wanted to do? And when did you know that you were actually going to get a chance to do this for a living?
Well, those things are separated by a lot of time. So when I wanted to be the Yankee announcer, I was 9 years old. And
Wow.
I was very rational even as a child. So when I realized that I could not simply hit, and I was afraid of getting hit by the ball, I knew I was not going to be the Yankee first baseman. So I wanted to be involved in the Yankees in some way because I loved the Yankees. There were years, like when I was 9 or 10 or 11, that I watched or listened to every single Yankee game, much to the chagrin of my parents.
Yeah.
So that was at 9 years old. I wanted to be the Yankee announcer, but how many kids want to be, the Yankee announcer? But that was the dream. Now, in terms of when I thought it was going to be a reality, while I was at school, I had fallback plans. I started to write as a sports editor of the newspaper at school, and I got into, I worked at the New York Post. So I just didn't think it was a real viable thing at that point. But then once I became a writer covering the Yankees, I was the rain delay guest all the time on radio. And I tried to always make myself, the expert on the Yankees. So when they needed me on radio or TV, I'd be that guy. And I could start to see the germination of maybe that happening. And by traveling with the Yankees when I was their beat writer, I kind of got rid of the accent a little bit. And I think that's when I started to think, well, maybe with a lot of luck that this could happen.
So, Michael, we've talked about this offline, and, just for our listeners, it's important to know that we are very good friends. And I always ask you, what kind of writer are you? Are you like a Tom Verducci? Are you like, one of the greatest writers? And I think your answer was very honest. You said, I wasn't the greatest writer. I was always a good writer and I can write fast, but I'm paraphrasing. So I want you to correct me, keep me honest here. But I had a nose to get information. People just felt comfortable. By the way, company included, I will tell you a lot of stuff. What was it about you that was able to get that? And do you think your work as a journalist has helped you on television? Because I'd never even you don't say or you're always on point.
I definitely think it's helped me because I still to this day, Alex, even when I'm doing a baseball game, I try to approach it as a writer or a journalist with that kind of thought. In terms of, I don't think I was a great writer by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not being humble at all. I got the words down, and the newspapers, you had to get them down in a certain amount of time, get them in. It was important not to miss deadline. I never missed deadline. I was always the fastest writer on the staff, but my strength was as a reporter. I got people to tell me things, and I think that what you see from me on TV, when you hear from me on radio, what you're seeing right now, this is not an act. This is who I am. Alex knows me forever. I'm not different on TV than I'm in real life. So when I'm talking to somebody, I think they just get comfortable. And I'm not trying to be a phony. I'm not trying to be two-faced to get them to tell me stuff. I'm just curious about things. So my curiosity, I think, gets people comfortable and I get them to draw out a little bit and probably say things that maybe they didn't want to say. And that's why one of the things that I'm most proud of is the Center Stage show that we used to have on Yes and kind of derailed because of COVID. Because when you have an hour to sit down with somebody and it's not about you, it's about them, and you're listening and you're actually curious about their life, I think you could get them to tell you really interesting things. And I can't tell you how many people that we had on that show that at the end of the show would say, boy, I told you things I never, ever thought I would even talk about because you just got comfortable. Snoop Dogg told me, this is the best interview I've ever done in my life. He told me that 3 years after he actually was interviewed. So all of that stuff made me feel good. And I think I bring that curiosity and almost that wide-eyed innocence into everything I do because I really do care what people do for a living. I want to know, how did you get here? How did you become successful? Because I want to apply that to my own life as well. Not only to do the interview, but actually to use it in my life.
I do wonder, going back to this kind of transition to the booth, it's a really interesting moment, not just in your career, but sort of in the history of broadcasting. Jerry Cardinal was a guest on this show. He obviously was pivotal in creating Yes Network. Tell us about that move to the booth, not just for you, but also kind of what it meant for Yes Network to sort of come onto the scene from a business perspective and from a broadcaster's perspective.
Well, the first move to the booth obviously was to the radio side. So I
Right.
covered the Yankees for 5 years, 2 for the Post and then 3 for the Daily News. And during that time, the MSG network got the rights to the Yankees. So I pitched to them. It's weird that the biggest news is always broken in the newspapers because the newspapers before the internet, it was always a day behind real life. I said, you're on the air live with our post-game show with Al Troutwig. Let me go on the air, go into the clubhouse and tell you why that guy threw that pitch, why that guy struck out on that pitch, why he hit a home run, and put it on the air immediately because TV is the medium of immediacy. And they actually bought it. And that was my entree into getting a regular gig. And I was lucky because the Daily News allowed me to do it. And their only thing was don't break news on the TV because we're still paying you for the newspaper. So that was my foot in the door. And I became kind of looked at as an authority. And then when John Sterling, his partner, left on the radio side, they were looking for somebody to work with him. And they had like 5,000 applicants. I mean, being the Yankee radio announcer is a big deal. And somehow I got the gig. So I worked with John for 10 years. And I'll tell you what, Jason, if that was the only job that I ever had, I would have been thrilled. If I would have been an old man and retired and just doing radio, I would have been thrilled because I had reached my goal of being the Yankee announcer. Then they started the Yes Network. And I just think that the formation of the Yes Network, it was so forward-thinking by George Steinbrenner. And I think that has changed the entire landscape of the regional sports networks. And it showed organization, and Alex can speak to this as well. There is something there that you could make money just off your team and own the rights for yourself and produce your own games. I think Yes changed the whole game in that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're exactly right. Did it feel like that in the moment? I mean, obviously that's, again, a big moment for your career, but also did it feel like you were doing something historic, or were you just sort of like doing your thing and it was happening around you? What was the feeling in the moment?
Well, the feeling in the moment that it was definitely big because you could see they put a lot of money into it. I mean, they did not short shrift it at all. It was big time. Right from the very beginning, they didn't scrimp on cost or at all, whatever. But there's one funny story. Like Alex, I grew up really, really poor. All right. So I was on the radio and I was making a nice living. And my mom at that point, so we started Yes in 2002. She was in her 70s. And the first year of Yes, we weren't on Cablevision. And my mom lived in a Cablevision area. So she couldn't watch the Yankees. And every time I come over, I try to drop by every day. And she'd be sitting there. She goes, "What an idiot. You gave up the radio. Now you're not even on TV." I said, "Mom, I am on TV." She goes, "You're not on my TV. You gave it all up. You had a nice job." You had a job you could have kept for years, but you're a big shot. You had to go for the big thing. And now look, I said, Mom, just give it time. So at that point, I didn't feel like it was that very big. But then the next year when it was settled and the games were on Cablevision, I think she felt a little bit better. And you could just see that it was such a big deal around baseball. And I think other owners were jealous as well. So at that moment, when we got total clearance on all the cable systems, we knew that it was something big.
So, Michael, one of the things that I love about the Yankees, and I know you do too, is that, and I think this comes from George Steinbrenner, the longevity of the employees, of the team members, have been there forever. And I saw that this weekend. Most people have been there for 20, 25, 30 years, whether it's Sonny or Debbie or a lot of the support staff. My question to you is, you still going to, when I hear you every night, it's like you're 21 years old. You're so excited. You have so much gratitude to still be the voice of the Yankees. Where do you get that appreciation and how do you do it? Because after so many years, it's like day one for you.
Well, thank you for that. And I think that's important too. I hate any guy or gal in a job that phones it in, just takes it for granted. And, I've got longtime friends. Most of my real close friends are people that I met in college, like Mike Breen. I've always told them, if you ever hear me complain about this job, just slap me right in the face, because this is a special job. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And you know what? There's things that you give up. Would I like to spend even more time with my family? Of course I would. But this job allows me to make things possible for them that they wouldn't have if I didn't have this job. So everything in life is a trade-off. And every day I walk into that booth, Alex, and I've told you this when we did the K-Rod stuff, I just look around, even if it's for a couple of seconds, and I realize, you're pretty lucky, you big-headed freak. You're pretty lucky that you're here every single day. So I never take it for granted. And I think it's important to provide to the fans when they tune into Yankee baseball, they're tuning in to get away from the realities of life and all the things that are going on. That's their escape. And if the guy that's on the air is not happy to be there, it's going to bleed over to them. So I never want them to feel that way. And really, short answer to your question, I know how lucky I am. I mean, I never take it for granted. So I do. I'm pumped up every time I'm on the air, even if I'm tired. But once that light goes on, I know, wow, you're a pretty lucky guy to have this job.
I feel the same way about my job, and I know Alex does too. So it's nice to hear that is how you feel, because it does come through, as Alex says. All right, let's talk about K-Rod. That was the collab that you guys did together. Take us back to how that came about, Michael, and what it was like doing it.
Well, I loved it. It's one of the favorite things that I've ever done in my career, and Alex was so easy to work with. And, the way it came about was, as far as I know, I was being considered for Sunday Night Baseball. I ended up not getting that. And it wasn't anything I applied for, but, I was being considered to maybe do the play-by-play, which Alex was also in the booth for. And that wasn't, that it didn't work out. And then I got a call from Norby Williamson and said, would you be into doing an alternate cast where, it is Sunday Night Baseball. We do 8 of them, and it's going to be, you guys interview people. And I said, well, who would I be working with? And he said it would probably be Alex Rodriguez. And I said, well, that'd be great. And as he said, I said, that'd be great, the K-Rod broadcast. He said, what? I said, K-Rod. He goes, you just came up with that? I said, yeah. I said, it just fits. I mean, it used to be the Met reliever. They called him K-Rod. This could be K-Rod. And he goes, well, I'll have to run it past Alex. I don't know if he'd like that you got your name first. I said, Rod K doesn't work. So I have very, very, very fond memories of both of those years. And once Alex signed his exclusive deal with Fox, I knew that show had ended, but I miss it. This is the first year without doing it. And all the time I think about, gee, it would be so fun to do a K-Rod for today's show. But, I guess all things must pass.
Yeah, and Jason, my experience was very similar. I honestly felt like Michael and I need a ski mask. The fact that they were paying us to hang out with one of my best buddies, it was absolutely incredible. I'm like, what a gig, what a country.
So, Michael, speaking behind the scenes, I also am sort of fascinated. You've said a couple times that, there are jobs that you got that you didn't even essentially apply for or even raise your hand for. Tell us about your career path in that regard and sort of how you've made key decisions. Obviously there are times when you put yourself out there, but there are other times when people just valued your work and then said, here's another thing or here's another opportunity. How have you navigated that?
Well, I think, unfortunately, I don't say this with any recommendation for any young person. I think a lot of this has to do with being selfish. And I didn't get married till I was 49 years old. And a lot of these decisions that I made that led to what you might say is my success, I didn't have to make it thinking of a wife, and I didn't have to make it thinking of children. If I had, I don't think I would have left the radio to the Yes Network, because that was a gamble. Was the Yes Network going to actually be a long-term thing? I would have stayed on the radio. I might have stayed on newspapers just to know, okay, you're going to have a steady paycheck. So I guess the fact that I never wanted to be married until I met my wife, Jody, that probably helped me along. I mean, you talk to a lot of kids in colleges and they say, well, how did you do this? And I wish I had some kind of great answer for them. So much of it is fortune. So much of it is luck, just being in the right place at the right time. But the one thing I always do tell people, and this is the one thing that I'm a big proponent of, and I tell my kids as well, never punch a clock. Never worry about you working too long. You got to work. I think there's so many people in the world that have similar levels of talent. I mean, there's an outlier like a Bob Costas out there all the time, but most people have the same talent level, give or take, a smidge. And when it's time to get moved up or it's time to get a promotion, the people that are doing the promoting are always going to be the ones that say, wow, that guy works hard. People can't hit like Alex Rodriguez or they can't throw like Alex Rodriguez, but they could play as hard as Alex Rodriguez. And I think that's the one thing that you control. Control the controllable, and that's effort. And the one thing I will always give my employer is top effort. I'm always going to work as hard as I possibly could. So again, long answer to your pointed question. I just think selfishness in terms of the fact that I made all these decisions just for me. And then once I got married, I was in these jobs and I didn't have to worry about that. But now I could see how it would affect you because I have these two great jobs, the radio show on ESPN and the Yankee gig on Yes. But my son is 9, my daughter's 11, and I do want to be a big part of their life growing up. And at some point, I think I'm going to have to give something up in order for that to happen. So that was a decision I never had to make when I was single, and I think that's important.
So, Michael, I want to take you back, call it 35, almost 40 years, when you were just a young lad and you were writing for the New York Post or the newspaper industry. And at that time, you had like the Rat Pack, right? You had like Bob Clappage, you had Jack Curry, John Heyman, Joel Sherman. You guys were like rock stars walking around, really smart, really competitive. You would drink. You can drink all night, but then you're competing like hell for the best story the next day. I thought that was fascinating. But take our listeners back to like approximately how much were you making on your first paycheck back in those days when you were in your mid-20s?
Well, when I finally became the Yankee beat writer for the Post, Alex, I think I got like $45,000 a year.
Wow.
And you might look at that and go, well, that's not that much. But believe me, that was more than my dad ever made. That was more than I dreamed that I would ever make. And I thought, wow, this is unbelievable. And I remember I broke a lot of stories at the New York Post because at that time, Billy Martin was the manager. And for some reason, he took an incredible liking to me. And he didn't like Bill Madden of the Daily News. So he would give me every single story just so that Bill Madden would get beaten. And the Post would put him on the front page. And I remember I kept going to the Post and said, I should be making more money. I'm giving you guys all these front page exclusives and stuff like, oh, this is all we have. This is all we have. And I remember one day I'm walking out of Yankee Stadium and it's about 1 a.m. and Mike Lupick is walking out with me. And he was the columnist for the Daily News. And, the Yankee parking lot when you would cross in the old stadium, Alex, yeah. I saw Billy Martin's car there. It was 1 a.m. And I said to Mike, I got to go check. I'm sorry. I got to go check. I said, something's up. Just my reporter antenna went up. And I went back into his office and he was sitting there drinking. And he told me he was going to quit the Yankees because the umpires were holding their hatred of him against his team. And he couldn't have that. Well, I ran back to the press room and I wrote this story and it was on the front page. Billy wants to quit. A big story taken all around the country.
Huge.
And then the next day, Mike Lupick went to the publisher of the Daily News and said, we got to get this guy.
Wow.
No matter what, we got to hire this guy. And so at the end of the year, they promoted Bill Madden to the baseball columnist, and they hired me from the Post. I couldn't believe it. To this day, I still can't believe it. They offered me $92,000.
Wow.
They doubled my salary. And then all of a sudden the Post said, well, we'll match it. And I said, no, I asked you for years to give me a raise and you didn't do it. I'm not going to play the Daily News against you. They made me this offer. I'm going to go there. So that was like a big deal in the industry because it also helped other writers because I was making, I became like when A-Rod went to Texas, Jason. I changed the salary structure a little bit because I got all this money to go to the Daily News, which was kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, I mean, first of all, that is an amazing parallel.
I love it. I love it. I know how much you study. First of all, you're a fan first, and I think that's why you're able to predict what the fans are thinking at all times. And I mean, you're usually 9 or 10 out of 10, which is phenomenal. But is there other guys that do the same job that you do, past or present, that you look, that you study, that you admire from afar?
Well, I always say, I had a sister, I didn't have a brother. So, and then, my dad, and I always said that there were 4 male voices that were heard in my house growing up: Bill Rizzuto, Frank Messer, and Bill White. I know you were a Met fan, but they were like Murphy, Nelson, and Kiner for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I modeled myself after any broadcaster growing up. I mean, I looked at the success, obviously, of Marv Albert and, the way he handled big moments. I look across town. Gary Cohen is just excellent. How he broadcasts for the Mets. We've kind of run on parallel tracks the same years that we've worked and stuff like that. I look at him and I think he's amazing. There's a lot of guys around baseball. Like I love Vince Scully. John Shambi is amazing, with the Chicago Cubs. There's so many great announcers in our sport. And, you don't steal, but you try to take a little bit out of everybody. So my son is a big consumer of all the calls that they put up on social media after games.
Mm-hmm.
And like I hear him, like he could be sitting next to me on the couch and he's playing him, and there could be like little nuances in a call that I hear, and I go, wow, maybe I'll tweak that a little bit and use it for myself. I don't look at it as stealing. I look at it as borrowing. But yeah, I think there's so many great people in our industry, and I try to take a little something from all of them.
Well, I know Alex would love to rewrite history and go back and have you call his 500th. He told me that earlier, that he wished he could redo that. He wished he could hit that one again.
Okay, so Jason, here's the deal, and I've told Alex this to his face. The guy took forever to hit the 500th home run. I finally had a day off, and he decides to jack one to left field that day. If he had done a lot sooner, I would have done it. But again, he just kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and I didn't make the call. But I did make the call on the 600th, and I did get his last one to 696, so that makes me feel good. And I got his 3,000th as well.
That's true.
Yeah, there you go.
And I know where I was, too. I was walking in Central Park, and like I got my phone buzzed and said, Alex Rodriguez says this 500. I almost threw the phone in the fountain. I said, yeah, of course. Thanks, Alex.
Maybe that's what he needed. Maybe he needed the pressure off of you making the call to actually.
Exactly.
It all ties together. It all ties
Big
together.
bummer in my career. Big bummer.
All right, here we go, Alex. We want to be respectful of your time, Michael, so we're going to move to our lightning round. So this will be quick. We'll bounce it back and forth. What's the best piece of advice you've received on deal making or your business?
Know your value. And, I got some of that from Alex Rodriguez. Don't think that you're not as valuable as you really are. You should know exactly what you do for a company, and you should be remunerated in that way.
What's the worst advice you've ever received?
I was told, sometimes if you're in a tough negotiation, I know this is a lightning round, but I talked with Scott Boras, who used to represent Alex. And, we talked about, he never represented broadcaster, but I have a good relationship with Scott. And he said, well, I said, maybe you could represent me. He said, well, if you do, if that ever happened, if I tell you to walk away, you got to walk away. I said, no. You don't walk away from the Yankees. I said, you could walk away if you're one of 700 players and you know that there's going to be bidding. You don't walk away from the Yankees. So that was probably the worst.
That's good. That's really good. All right. So you can't say Alex is an answer to this. Who's your dream broadcast partner, dead or alive? Who would you want to be in the booth with if you could pick anyone?
Oh, man. I really love the people I work with at Yes. I know that's a cop-out. so I won't go that route. And I idolize Vince Scully, but Vince Scully worked alone, so I don't know if I get any words in edgewise. It'd probably be fun to work with. I have an unbelievable respect for Joe Buck. I would probably like to do a game with Joe Buck.
Michael, what's your hype song before a big game?
Well, let's see. You're going to think I'm corny. I love Build Me a Buttercup. That always puts me in a good mood. but probably for baseball, it's Glory Days.
Ah, that's
nice.
Those
good one.
Really good ones.
I already think you're corny, Michael. Just saying.
They played that song at my wedding too. Build Me a Buttercup.
Ah, that's great. That's great. All right, and finally, what's your advice for folks who can't be Alex Rodriguez, who want to work around baseball? What should they be doing?
All I can do is give advice, maybe on being a broadcaster. Never turn down an opportunity to be on the air, wherever it is, whatever it is, whether it's a podcast or it's a 5,000-watt radio station. Just be on the air as much as you possibly can, because that's the most important currency that we deal with. And again, an offshoot of that is never let anybody in the world outwork you, because that's the one thing you can control.
All right. Well, this has been so fun. I was really looking forward to it. And I know Alex was too, because he knows you so well. It's one of these voices that's been in my head for so long, and your written words as well. So thank you so much for the time. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you, guys. It was a lot of fun. And Alex, get K-Rod back together somehow.
Yes, Michael. And I wanted to say thank you for obviously being on our show. You're a great friend. And really thank you for a very emotional weekend for me coming back to Yankee Stadium. Your incredible introduction, as usual. It's like we got the band back together. Made it very memorable for me and my girls. Thank you.
I'm glad. And I was so happy for you. The reception you got, it was amazing. And I thought the reception was incredibly, incredibly warm. You could speak to that better than me, but I was happy for you.
Thank you, Michael.
The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and me, Jason Kelly. This episode was made by Stacey Wong, Anna Mazarakis, Lizzie Phillip, and Victor Iveas. Our theme music was made by Blake Maples. Our executive producers are Kelly LaFerriere, Ashley Honig, and Brendan Newnham. Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. Additional support from Rachel Scaramuzzino and Elena Sausangelis. Thanks for listening to The Deal. If you have a minute, please subscribe, rate, and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. And remember, if you're a Bloomberg subscriber, you can listen to all of our episodes absolutely ad-free on Apple Podcasts. All you need to do is find the Bloomberg channel and connect your Bloomberg account. I'm Jason Kelly. See you next week.